The HaMei'ir LaAretz Mode. What the heck is that? I have called this talk the rediscovering, the identifying of this mode that we all know and use but aren't aware of. And in my work on my doctorate, I came to the realization, ended up writing an entire chapter on this, that there's a mode that we use that is from the medieval period that shows up in trouvère songs like of the famous Matthieu le Juif from the 13th century, where secular love songs and ballads are written in this mode. We'll have more to say about the mode in a moment. But my whole point is you're going to see material and you're going to say, I know that, or at least most of us will. What does one thing have to do with another? And what I'm going to demonstrate is that they actually are related to each other. And we have a Jewish mode here that goes back to the medieval period that, as far as I know, has never been codified and identified. The first attempt that we know of to label the modes, the scales, mode and scale, problematic in and of itself. Are we talking about with motifs or without motifs? But we're just going to call them modes because that's how they're referred to here in Joseph Zinger's book. Joseph Zinger was from Silesia. Actually, he was born in Hungary and then he went to Silesia. He was the chief cantor in Nuremberg from 1874 to 1880. And then he was called to the Seitenstädter temple in 1881, sometime after the retirement of the great Zulzer. In 1886, when he was in Vienna, he published this short little folio, I can't even call it a book, Die Tonalten des traditionellen Synagogengesanges, and then he uses a Yiddish word, Steigel. What's a Steigel? Does anybody know the Yiddish word Steigel?
It's a prayer mode. It's a prayer mode.
It's a prayer mode, but what does the word actually mean if you look it up? That's how it has been applied to Jewish music.
Oh, ascension. A scale.
That's what it means in German,
Right.
to rising up.
Yeah.
But in Yiddish, it means a manner.
Oh.
A manner, the way of doing something. Oh. You ever look up the word Nusach, or really Nosach, in the Evan Shoshan dictionary? Have you ever done that?
No.
The Evan Shoshan dictionary is like the Oxford English Dictionary of Hebrew. Try it sometime. Look up the word Nosach, and you'll see that there is no mention of liturgical music whatsoever. The closest it gets to davening is talking about Nusach Ashkenaz, Nusach Sfarad, Nusach Edot Mizrach. But in that context, what is he talking about?
The text.
The text, right? A girsa, a Nusach. The word Nusach means, one of the first translations in the Evan Shoshan is Orach. Aleph, Cholam, Resh, Chet. What's an Orach? The way. Right? Like Orach Chaim in the Shulchan Aruch. It's one of the 4 divisions of the Shulchan Aruch. It's called Orach Chaim. What's that mean? The way of life. So what's an Orach? It's a Nosach. What's a Nosach?
Stein.
It's a Steigel. We don't really know when the word Nusach becomes the word of choice in the cantorial lexicon of Eastern European chazonim. Perhaps Matt knows, but I have never found it. But we do know that this musical entity was referred to by other names. One of them was in Yiddish, Steigel. But before even that, in Western and Central Europe, we see in Naumburg, for example, who published in 1947 in Paris, Samuel Naumburg, when he is relating something that he learned from his teacher, anybody remember who it was? Le Zengel, the most important cantorial teacher of the beginning of the 19th century. He was born in 1781. By the time he was 19 years old, he was already a superstar in the year 1800. And before Sulzer became the superstar to whom everyone went to go and study, they went to Zengel. And Zengel was in Munich. Naumburg was from Munich. And Naumburg studied at his feet. And Lerv Zenger's music shows up in Idelson, and it says 1840. Why 1840? Because that's when Naumburg notated it, because he knew Western notation and Zengel didn't. When Naumburg is reporting something that he learned from his teacher, we would say, I learned this Nusach from my teacher, Lerv Zenger. That's not what he says. He's publishing in French. So what does he label something? Ready? Ancienne manière. You got it? Ancienne manière. The ancient manner. This is the way my teacher taught me. This is not a composition. That's a Naumburg composition. But when he's writing, he'll write ancienne manière. That's how they called it. He wasn't using the word Nusach. When you look in Sulzer, you go back to either 1839, Shir Zion 1, or to Shir Zion 2 in 1865, you will see there are places where he is composing, like his great Matovu. I don't know if you ever, oh God forbid, would you ever do the Sulzer Matovu here? No.
God forbid.
God forbid. But you do his Hodo LaAretz. Which it was a delight to hear it in triplet, because in America they turn it into a 4/4, and it's awful. Not passing judgment. When Sulzer is reporting, particularly in his 1865 book, which is much more about Nusach than it is about his compositions, he labels it a period W period. Alte Weise.
That's what Bear does as well.
Bear does it as well, right? Bear is a little bit later. He's in 1877. He's in Sulzer's in 1865. Alte Weise. What does that mean?
Ancien manière.
Ancienne manière.
Weise in German means actually both the manner of doing something as well as a melody, as in a folk melody. So in everyday German, if you want to speak about the way you do something, it's called Art und Weise. Art meaning not art in English, but rather also mode or manner or way. So they say Art und Weise. And Weise means this as well as melody or Nusach in this case.
And so here we have Steigel, which has a meaning of musical connotation, but also has a meaning of simply the manner in which something is done. Next slide, please. We take for granted, those of us who speak in the cantorial parlance, whether we're cantors or not, we take for granted that everybody agrees on the names of the modes. I wish Avia was sitting here, because the other day he called out saying, that's Yishtabach mode, referring to Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Malkeinu, when Matt was doing his comparison of a medieval German song that sounds a lot like Shochenad. Now, in my teaching, I also call that Yishtabach mode, to differentiate it from Magen Avot mode. But take a look here.
Phrases.
You said it? Phragish. Or some people call it Ahavarabba, right? Because many of the modes were named after pieces of liturgy in which the mode is now well established. Not usually where it first appears, but like on the weekday davening, the passage Yishtabach starts in this scale, in this mode, and you start Baruch Hu that way, and Birkat Yotzer, and by the time you get to Ahava Rabbah, it's got its name. Right? All right. Same thing. Next slide. Same thing with Mogen Ovaus. Magen Avot mode. Where did we first hear Magen Avot? At Vayichulu. But it's only later, when you get to Magen Avot, that it's called Magen Avot mode. Who established this way of naming modes after you're already into the liturgy? Our first evidence is Yosef Zingu, but I don't believe that he was making this up. I believe that, like all of our forebears, they were recording, and they were trying to preserve a tradition that they had already learned. He happens to be one who is writing it down for posterity. Everybody with me? Everyone knows Magen Avot, right? Ba, 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 ba. Natural minor, right? But that doesn't tell the whole
Same
story.
one we had before.
I'm sorry?
That's not the Frankish one that you had on the screen below.
No, it's not. That's the whole point. He called the other one Yishtabach mode. He's calling this one Magen Avot. Okay? So we have two different scales, two different names. Of course, those of us who know Nusach know that this is not the end of the story, right? I was at the Orthodox Shul Friday night, and Lechazim did Vayichulu, and it went into relative major, da da dee da da, ba 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 ba. So it winds its way back and forth between this natural minor and the relative major. So that's really Magen Avot mode, but this is what Zinger gave us. I don't see him using the major anywhere here, but that's not really the point. Next slide, please. Last but not least, he only gives us 3. And then he goes into examples of liturgy. And really, E flat, da da da, da 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 So it really continues up to the E flat. It has 10, actually 11 pitches to this scale, because it goes up to E flat so that you get a perfect fourth between the B flat and the E flat. Otherwise you would have a tritone. But underneath the C, what do we have? Do we have B flat?
Usually, yes.
Below the C, we use a half step. So it's really an 11-note scale.
Are you saying there's an E flat at the top and an E natural at the bottom?
Correct. And the Ashkenazi modes do this. They are not fixed to 8 notes. All right.
So when did these actually start? Because when the siddur or the muscle was formulated, the prayers were not the same as they are today, because the rabbis or the period of time were able to adjust. But before it was written down before the 17th century or the 18th century, what were the motives or the steig or whatever you want to call it used? And those services like Kabbalah Shabbat, not as we know it today, your Rosh Hashanah wasn't, they've added and added and added, because it was up to the chief rabbi at the time or wherever it was to change the siddur or to take away or put, etc., etc. So we don't know the original, or we don't know from the time of the Bet HaMikdash, but we know that the Chazan went back to Egyptian times because it's mentioned.
Yes, but
So-
what that person was singing, we have absolutely no clue. And what Idelson did, this came up in Matt's talk, what Idelson was trying to do has been, shall I say, set aside. It's a very forced attempt to take everything back to the Beit HaMikdash, and later studies have shown that this music couldn't possibly be proven to go back to the Beit
They
HaMikdash.
couldn't sing Fradish in the Beit HaMikdash.
Probably not.
Idol worship. They used that in. Fradish was used for idol worship.
We don't actually know that. There is no proof. We have no written notation that goes back before the 16th century. So when people say, this is true and that's true, the truth is we don't know. What we do know a lot of, is what happened from 1818 onward. Why? Can we go to my other show? Oh, this is what I said. Discovering, identifying a new old Nusach mode. It has existed for a long time, but we haven't given it a name and we haven't identified it, so that's what I've tried to do. So I started to tell you this before. I was in a concert in New York City at the Brotherhood Synagogue in 2017. It was about Jewish Meister singers and troubadours and trouvères, including Mathieu le Juif. And I'm sitting there listening to these secular songs that these troubadours and trouvères, many of whom were Jews, they were itinerant musicians, much like the klezmorim were in later years. And I'm sitting there listening to this love song in ancient French, or medieval French, and I hear the song is going like this or something like this, and then it goes like this. So a little natural minor, a little harmonic minor, and then it went like this. Well, what was I just doing? Do you see these red notes? That's natural minor. The G here could be a G natural. I also put a red sharp next to it to indicate that it can be an harmonic minor with the red notes. Can you see the difference in the colors? Okay. So the song was going up like this, da da ba ba dee da. And you noted this in the previous scale. This is an F natural. This is an F sharp. You've got minor, and then you've got a lower extension to the subdominant, to the fourth, the scale step 4. Right? Here's the D. In major. Bach never did that. You don't even hear that in Renaissance music. Well, I heard this song and I almost fell off my chair. I went chasing after it, and I spoke with Anna, her last name escapes me right now. She's the director of the Boston Camerata. She's a Basel scholar where they do all of this kind of work. And she kept sending me things in Dorian. I said, no, I'm not talking about Dorian. I'm not talking about this changing here. I'm not talking about this scale step changing here. I'm talking about this scale step being down here where it's not 6 anymore, but rather it's 3 of a new 1. Is everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
I mentioned 18, 18, 18, 19. And why I say, with all due respect, we don't have a clue about what they were singing in the Beit HaMikdash. It's because we don't have any musical notation from back then. The closest we get to descriptions of things being described as this should be sung thus and so, Matt referred to this, comes from the Sefer HaMei'ir. HaMei'ir lived from 1356 to 1427. His book was written in around 1390, and he says that he is reporting the traditions of his grandfather. If you do the math, that takes us to about 1330, 1325. For Ashkenaz, that's pretty old. And here and there he would say, famously, which is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim, Siman 691, Siman 619, I reversed my numbers, where it's talking about Yom Kippur and Kol Nidre, and he says this is what you're supposed to do, and then from Sefer HaMei'ir, there's this gloss that's added where it says, Al Yishaneh Adam Mimakom Ha'ir. You all know this? Cantor should memorize this. This is from the Sefer HaMei'ir, which is quoted in Siman 619 in Orach Chaim in the Shulchan Aruch. Because it's from here that the cantorial tradition, it's like our Mount Sinai experience. He says, Al Yishaneh Adam, one should not change minhag ha'ir, from the custom of the city. Here's the kicker. Afilu banigunim.
Right, okay.
Wow.
And it's from the Maharil that cantors for the next 7 centuries have been saying, you're not supposed to change this stuff. This is as if it, as Matt pointed out, there was another source that points it back to going to the time of the Tanaim and the Amoraim, which is even crazier. But that whole idea of calling something a nigun misinai is that same sort of fanciful, let's give this the same sanctity as Torah and put it all the way back to the Sinai experience. So Kol Nidre is a nigun misinai. But we really don't know what they were singing in the Beit HaMikdash, let alone in the early Gaonic period. We have a little bit of a clue come 1171. There's the famous martyrs of Blois, where they were apparently singing the Aleinu melody as they were being burned at the stake. And then Eric Werner from 1215 shows a melody from a nearby church that sounds like something like the Aleinu we sing today. That's probably our oldest Misinai Nigun. Be that as it may, 1818, 1819, we get an extraordinary book that goes into much greater detail than Sefer HaMei'ir or Yosef Yuspahan, which is from the 1700s that Matt referred to about you should sing something thus and so. These are all rabbinic books. There was a Luach Beit Knesset, a 500-page book in Yekische Germanic detail from the city of Frankfurt am Main, written by the older brother of the famous Avraham Geiger. Who was Geiger? Those of you who go to the Geiger school?
Founder of the Reform movement.
Founder of the Reform movement. His older brother was Shlomo. And his older brother Shlomo was a Rav Chazan, in Frankfurt. And he painstakingly wrote, over an entire Jewish year from 1818 to 1819, a book called Divrei Kehilot, a play on words from Divrei Kohelet, where he painstakingly starts in Elul, and he goes day by day by day, just like a Luach Beit Knesset would today. It tells you what you're supposed to say on a given time, on a given service. And he would say, Mincha Lecho, on the second day of Elul, you begin in Ashrei. Okay, that's not news. Benigun Yadua. In the known nigun. Now, nigun is a problematic word for us today because we tend to think of nigunim as being Hasidish nigunim without words. This goes back to nomenclature. I mentioned Alte Weise, I mentioned Ancien Maniero, I mentioned what Zinger called them Steigel in Yiddish. In Hebrew it was called nigun. Such that the Chazan, he says, HaChazan minagen benigun yadua. He doesn't say HaChazan korei benigun yadua. He doesn't say the Chazan calls it out in nigun yadua. He doesn't say HaChazan shal ben or mizamer. He doesn't use a musical term that we're most used to. He says minagen. What's minagen today? It's to play a musical instrument.
Which is a modern distinction.
Right.
Between singing and playing an instrument. The distinction between nigun and zivra or bashir, it's a modern...
These are all modern Hebrew issues of nomenclature. In Divrei Kehilot, he says, benigun yadua. This scale is going to be known by, is going to be identified by Geiger in 1818, because it was Tishrei, it was Sukkot. He calls it Benigun Yom Tov. What is Benigun Yom Tov? Right? That's the Amidah mode for Shalosh Regalim. You got the scale? Let's move on. Was ist das? Karma, Munach Zaka, Munach Sergo, Munach Revi, F sharpie. I'm going to jump around a little bit. Mapach, Kashta, Munach Zakef Gadon. What is this?
Yomim
Nari intro. And I'm going to cut Merecha Tipecha, Merecha Et Nachta, and then Merecha Tipecha, Sof Pasuk. In fact, it's even in the same key. Ba 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 in A minor, with the lower extension in D major. Next slide. Somebody commented, I was leading the egalitarian Shachrit. I know some of them are a little hard when they get blown up, they get blurry. I was leading the egalitarian Shachrit on Thursday, and we were sharing the Sefer Torah. It came downstairs. I grabbed the Sefer Torah, and I went, Kuma Adonai liafutzu v'yelecha v'yanusu mesalecha mipanecha. You can't see the rest of it. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah v'Adonai mirushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah li'amo Yisrael b'kedusha v'tigale v'tirael malchuto aleinu b'zman karov v'yachom b'nei zadenu v'nei tarhom v'yizol lechenu chesed rachim v'ratzon v'ramar amen hakol chavod laTorah אין כאן כהן נא לעמוד פלוני בן אלמוני על ראשונה במקום הכהן, או whatever. ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו, ואתם הבקים לאדוני אלוהיכם, חיים כולכם היום. It's a different key, but it's C minor going up, focusing on the G, but still, and ending on the F in major. Ad kedei kach, I don't know how many people have encountered this because you're in Germany and I'm not. But if you go to Zedek Scheuermann, who was the Chazan of the West End Synagogue in Frankfurt am Main, early 20th century, he writes out his Kulam Ahuvim. Kulam Ahuvim, Kulam Derurim, וכולם עושים HaMei'ר LaAretz Mode אמריתית, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה וטהרה, בשירה וזמרה. מברכים שבחים פארים ומערים. Next slide, I don't know if it's there. See, yes there is. ומקדישים וממליכים. What's that for? Kulam Ahuvim, obviously it's from Shachrit. Which service is he writing this out for? Weekday! Weekday!
Also for Mariv also.
Also for Mari! Very good.
And by Eben Soharon.
And by Eben Soharon, which I just showed you. I just showed it to you, right? By Eben Soharon is up here. The Gabbai chants it, that's where most of us know it from. And in Shema Uvilchoteha, the Chazan is right. If it's correct in Shema Uvilchoteha v'Shachrit, it's also correct for Shema Uvilchoteha in Ma'ariv. Wait a minute, Eastern Ashkenazi Nusach. Fregish for Shachrit weekday. What do you do in Ma'ariv? Shema Uvilchoteha? Also Fregish. So at some point in Eastern Europe, this HaMei'ir LaAretz Mode got replaced by what was which was more common in the East, and that was Fregish, or Ahavara. Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Next slide. Yes, perfect. All right, this is from Wahlberg, but he takes it right out of Bear. So this is 1877. What about in this? The A. This could also be sharp. The G. Suddenly goes into C major. Anybody recognize these motifs?
Yeah.
Ah.
Motif 4 is from Shacharit.
High holy days. Shema uvirchoteha. Kol hakavod. Interestingly enough, that does not show up in Ma'ariv for Shema uvirchoteha. We have the great Messinai tune that I referred to earlier. But be that as it may, where does this first come in? I'm sorry? Do it again? Sure. I'll give it away. Baruch Shamar v'haya ha'olam Baruch Hu Baruch Oseh v'reshit Baruch Shemo Yachidche olamim Melech Meshubach V'adei Ad Shemo HaGadol Baruch Atah Hashem I'm sorry There are variants on that one. It starts at Baruch Shamar, or some people started at Mizmor Shel Chanukat Bayit David, one song earlier. Walberg calls these the Baruch Shamar motifs. Okay. But as Elias pointed out, he thought it first as, this is Shema U'Virchoteha for Shachrit, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. What's the first text after Baruch Hu and Birkat Yotzer, if it's not Shabbat? HaMei'ir LaAretz. And remember, Nusach names get applied to texts once the mode is fully established. And so I chose HaMei'ir LaAretz because my roommate at the seminary said to me, you know, you should call it HaMei'ir LaAretz, because I was looking for a name. And I said, why should I call it HaMei'ir LaAretz? He said, well, you discovered this, and your last name is Meir. So I thought, why not? Next slide. As to Elias's point, this is small, this is Bear, 1877, 1044. If you know his numbers, this is Rosh Hashanah Shachrit. Somebody was talking about nerdiness before. This is Nusach nerdiness. Do you know what Bear 1114 is? No, sorry. That's being a nerd. Anyway. See why I wanted to put that A there before? Clearly a minor D major lower extension, just like a Revia in the Torah Trop for Yamim Noraim. Lehodot. Notice the jump of that fifth, because we're going to see that soon again a lot. Lehodot lecha clearly in A minor with this D major lower extension. Next slide. This will knock your socks off. Oh no. Is that the next slide? Yep. Oh, we'll come back to this. Go. Next. We are not interested in the Deutsche Weise here. We are interested in the Polnische Weise. I gotta talk fast. You'll all recognize this. Yitkadash, v'yitkadash, Shemei Rabba. Now I know there are variants. We're not talking about whether your variant is the same as Bear's. We don't care. There's that G sharp. I told you that could be there. A minor all the way, even with the G sharp, harmonic minor. Sorry, I didn't do that right. I'm talking and singing at the same time. There, I got it. Stop. interpreted that. Next. By the way, did you notice that the ba 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 ba, which started back at Baruch Shamar on High Holy Days, it starts in the A minor section and only later uses the D major. N'ilah starts on the bottom at that subdominant. So it can go either way, which shows us that this is a mode. It's running all the way through those original blue and red notes. And depending on where you are, if you're in the red notes, you're in minor. If you're in the blue notes, you're in major. But you don't have to start in one or the other. Fabian Oguch, in Der Voll Beter Cantor. It says 1930, but he wrote it in 1883. It was published posthumously. He was the chazan of the other shul, actually, the Orthodox shul. The West End was progressive. This was the Bernplatz synagogue. Yes, you know that? Famous. You can only see it in photographs now because on November 9th it was plundered and burned to the ground. Shlomo Geiger, the older brother of Avraham Geiger, was the Rav Chazan of the Bernplatz synagogue in Frankfurt am Main. He's the one who writes, you should do the Kedusha on Pesach, let's say, Benigun Nivchal, in the melody of your choice. But when you get to L'Dor Vador, he specifically says, HaChazan menagen benigun Yom Tov. Oguch attempted to write down in musical notation some 60 years after Geiger wrote his book, the very same musical traditions that Geiger was writing about, in the very same shul. And there's a great correlation between what you find in Oguch and what is described as nigun this or nigun that in Geiger. Notice the jump of the fifth. How many of you start your Chazarat Hashatz L'Dor Vador that way?
Still got the F sharp in there.
It's got the F sharp. Let's keep going with him. It jumps the fifth. Clearly in minor. We recognize that. He El Melekado Vekadosh Ada Baruch. This is an anomaly. We'll get back to that later if I have time. Watch my finger. Baruch. I'm sorry. Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. It's the same mode. Next slide. Shorterman, same city. Same city. The Dovado Nagid Godlecha. I bet you don't start your L'Dor Vador that way. Oh, he jumps up to the fifth. Oh, there's that G sharp, remember from the Torah Trop. Nitzachim Kiddushat Kaddish. The F sharp is there. V'shivachar Elohim Mipinu lo yamush leolam va'ed ki el HaMei'ir G sharp HaMei'ir Gadol v'kadosh Ata. Pausing on the two of the A minor as we all do. Baruch atah Hashem, that anomalous thing. Ha'es inacholer ha'glad efshadosh. Even in 1990-ish, Pinchas Spyro, when he was writing out the Nusach for an American Baal Tefillah course. I got 5 minutes. Even he, who was doing Nusach Peshuta Legamre, it was so simple, it was not meant for Chazanim. It was not even meant for Shatzim. It was meant for lay people to try and at least get started. He does his V'hasiyenu like this. V'hasiyenu Adonai Eloheinu, and off he goes. And he uses that Ravia motif in D major from the Holy Day Torah Trop. All right, I got 5 minutes, which means I have 4.5. Oguch again. Here's V'hoshienu at the end of, V'hoshienu lechaim, and the Kahal answers, Amen. Jump the fifth. Chusechonenu. A minor, Baba, G sharp, Baba, clearly harmonic minor. V'hoshienu ki elechainenu ki emelech chanud v'ra'u. So this D major thing can happen ya ba 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 at the beginning and ya da 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 at the end, or it can leave it nebulous, which is what we're used to. Ba, da, da. Next slide. This is more Oguch. You got the idea already. Next slide. This is Weintraub. Now this is Weintraub, 1859. Oh, his father was the famous Kashtan. This is Eastern European Nusach. And what does he write up here? Alte Melodie, Alte Weise, okay? This is an Eastern European writing down Kashtan's Nusach, calling it Alte Melodie. This is from my papa. Neitzach netachim kedushat panadish. Ooh, what was that?
That was the.
It was an F natural. Now it has a phragish lower extension. Ooh, let me skip ahead. Baruch ata, Baruch ata, G sharp. F sharp, G, but that's the G minor, G majorized this. Baruch atah Adoshem, it's an anomaly. Baruch hu, Baruch Shemo. Whoa. So now Fragish is creeping in here, despite the fact that he started out with the F sharp. And look at the chorus unisono. High Holy Days. Amen. And what I'm trying to demonstrate here is what eventually happens is a minorizing because of a misunderstanding of what this mode was really supposed to be. Another slide. This is similar. Vodak, Czechoslovakian, 1901. He does the same thing with that Fragish ending, but at least he gets the ending right with the choir. Amen. Okay, you got the point? Next. This is what I wanted to get back to. I'm almost done. Do you remember Elias reminded us that that this mode shows up in Shema U'Virchoteha for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Shacharit? Well, here's that same V'kei Tanu. I'm going to bring it back here. V'kei Tanu l'shimcha gadol Sela v'emet lehodot lecha u'yafetcha v'ahava. Now in the Nigun B'Yom Tov, all of that Shalosh Regalim Amidah stuff, I kept saying, the Baruch Atah Hashem is an anomaly. Ba 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 ba. It doesn't fit the mode. We're used to this going, Baruch Atah Hashem. Look at Bear. Baruch Atah Hashem. And here's my hypothesis. I have 0 minutes left. Here's my hypothesis. The Baruch Atah Hashem that we expect here on the High Holy Days, which most people do, including Bear himself in other places, made sense because it was the relative major, C major, of the A minor that we're dealing with. Okay. But this is a sudden move to G major, which doesn't make any sense. What I propose is that these two motifs were used interchangeably, and then at a certain point they split, and this one went only with Shalosh Regalim, and Baruch Atah Hashem only went with Yamim Noraim. HaMei'ir LaAretz Mode. It's up to
we are out of time. Maybe you could chat with Brian later. I'm just going for. Thank you very much, Brian.
You're welcome.
Really, it's lots of interesting stuff.